is actually a big moment, and we should be paying really big attention to the possibility of this happening, and that the scenarios that could develop out of this, the responses to this could be unprecedented historically and lead to, an incredible intensification of this conflict that the U.S. has been in this warmongering the U.S. has been leading toward China. What's your reaction to this move?
Well, first of all of these different reactions from across the U.S. political spectrum, a lot of that is theater. There's no way that the White House doesn't know anything about it, or Nancy Pelosi is just doing this on her own. If you study the history of U.S.-Chinese relations or lack thereof, and the way the U.S. had tried alongside European powers to colonize China, and how they've spent all of this time post-World War II trying to reassert themselves over China. They dreamed of turning China into their own personal factory. They thought in the 80s they could overthrow the government. They could do to China what they were doing to the Soviet Union. The exact same process. This is why I say it's related. They do the exact same process along the peripheries of both of these countries, Russia and China. All of these countries that are very close by, they subvert and try to turn them against China or Russia. The one China policy that the U.S. agreed to says that Taiwan is part of China. It's very unambiguous. When you really read it, it's very unambiguous. It's very clear that it's part of China. The U.S. understands that it's part of China. It's hard to make any argument otherwise. If you're saying you don't support Taiwan's independence, and if they're not independent, then what are they? Who are they dependent on? The People's Republic of China. So these are blatant provocations. And the U.S. has been doing this for decades. They've been provoking China over Taiwan for decades. They were doing the same thing in regards to Hong Kong and Tibet and Xinjiang. This is part of going into a large country and trying to divide it against itself, create all of these fires everywhere they can to complicate China's rise or to stop it. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, is to stop it. This is one of the last footholds that the United States has, Taiwan. And because China has shut down U.S. interference in Hong Kong, they've stabilized Xinjiang. Tibet, I think, has been for quite a while. So this is the last place where they can foster separatism. And that's exactly what it is. It's the U.S. sponsoring separatism. They send weapons. They have U.S. troops actually in Taiwan, which is unbelievable. And now they're doing things like this, and it's all blatant provocations. And when you really think about it, Taiwan is thousands of miles away from U.S. shores. It's none of America's business, and yet they're right at the center of the entire. I mean, again, also think of Ukraine. Why is the U.S. the big major player across the table from Russia regarding Ukraine? They're on the other side of the Atlantic. When you really think about it, it's very obvious this is all imperialism. And when they try to make this minutia about how Russia and China are different, we can support maybe what Russia is doing or understand it, but not China. It's ridiculous. It's all the exact same thing. It's the U.S. at the center of the provocations in both regards.
Yeah, and you made a really good point about this is a historical phenomenon, that this isn't the first time the United States has violated the one China policy. I mean, the 1982 joint communique says something to the effect of the United States won't sell more arms to Taiwan than previous years, right? Than previously it had done, which means leading to what they call a final resolution, the end. Although it's broad language, and of course the United States passed that Taiwan Relations Act, which basically subverts all of it and says, oh, no, we're going to keep giving arms to Taiwan. But historically, I mean, Daniel Ellsberg came out. He was like, I'm going to violate the Espionage Act. I don't give a crap. And he recently, within the last couple of years, I believe this was just 2 years ago, said, look, I got documents. I have Pentagon documents that say that the United States was considering dropping nuclear weapons on China over the Taiwan Straits crisis, right? So this is historic. The United States has really used Taiwan as what I call like a launching pad over for its broader war on China. Now, I want to pull up something because I just found this. I just found this yesterday. A couple of days ago. I want to get your reactions to this. It's actually quite hilarious, but it's an example of how this isn't Nancy Pelosi's first time saber rattling with China. Like, not her first time. So there was an op-ed in the, I think it's now Washington Post owned, or the same parent company of the Post owns Foreign Policy, but it's a rag of the foreign policy establishment. And it's like, what does Nancy Pelosi think she's doing in Taiwan? A risky trip seems more about dramatic gestures than actual help. Written by a Taipei-based non-resident Mike Chinoy of some think tank. No, he's a fellow. Yeah, some think tank, U.S.-China Institute. So the first couple paragraphs are all we need to look at. Very short. And then he talks about, he's going to talk about how Nancy Pelosi got him arrested in China. So in 1991, he was in China. He was CNN's China bureau chief. U.S. Representative Nancy Pelosi got me arrested, he said. On a trip to Beijing with a congressional delegation, one of her colleagues alerted me that Pelosi and 2 other congressmen were planning to slip away from their official escorts and visit Tiananmen Square. But I was not told what her plan was, with news cameras rolling, to hold up that her plan was, with news cameras rolling, to hold up a banner and lay flowers to commemorate students killed when the Chinese army, I'm going to say so-called, supposedly, crushed pro-democracy demonstrators there 2 years earlier. After her gesture, Pelosi and 2 other members of Congress drove off, while furious Chinese police, unable to target a visiting foreign dignitary, roughly detained me and other reporters on the scene for several hours. It was my first experience with Pelosi's penchant for high-profile gestures designed to poke China's communist rulers in the eye, regardless of the consequences. So this isn't even Pelosi's first time. Nancy Pelosi will. I mean, this is part of something I was talking about, Brian, with in a past stream. I want to get your reaction to just all of this. There's something about having this incredible, like, this arrogant, extremely tiny minority, like political oligarchy, beholden to the military industrial complex, to these tiny number of private corporations that she literally trades stocks in. She has stocks all over the place, selling stocks all over the place with all the big tech corporations. You know, Pelosi is so arrogant that she is willing to do things like this, right? To put other people in harm's way. I mean, these are nobodies. This was the CNN bureau chief, Beijing bureau chief, put him in harm's way just to make a political statement. I mean, this is, and now we see that who are Nancy Pelosi's friends on Taiwan, visiting Taiwan? Newt Gingrich and the most right-wing faction of the Republican Party. That's who Mike Pompeo is singing her praises. So, I mean, what's your reaction to this? I just thought it was hilarious that she's done this before in China around a very sensitive issue like the Tiananmen incident.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing around the Tiananmen incident, if you actually look at the truth, even what the U.S. State Department itself said in its own cables about what actually happened there versus what people are still being told to this day, you know, this massacre, when it was actually the mob backed by the U.S., killing police and soldiers. That's another story for another time. But it just goes to show you, this isn't about right and wrong. Nancy Pelosi isn't standing up to the evil Chinese government. It's about looking down on China, refusing absolutely to show them respect, just as another group of people, let alone the large, powerful, increasingly powerful country China is. And this is not going to end well. They have this idea in their minds, and it's absolutely rooted in racism, that they are superior, just inherently superior. They don't actually have to do anything to be better than China. And we can actually see that this is not working out well for them, but they're going to continue provoking the situation. They would like to provoke a conflict with China, just like they're provoking a proxy conflict with Russia. They have a plan as this window of opportunity closes to encircle and contain China before it irreversibly passes the U.S. They want to try to destroy the economy by triggering a conventional war with China out at sea, blocking their maritime trade routes. And Nancy Pelosi, I mean, she's just one of very many people with this mindset, this mentality, looking down on China, provoking China, insisting on spreading these narratives. It's hard to tell whether she actually believes it or not. Anyone that actually spends time, I mean, if you're going to go through the effort of provoking an incident, shouldn't you look into the details and make sure you got them right? If she did, if she even just looked at what the U.S. State Department itself said about that incident, she wouldn't. But it just becomes a smokescreen that they can carry on with their racism and imperialism behind, because otherwise they would just have to come out and say, well, we're better and we're not going to bow to the Chinese. We don't care how powerful they are. We'll knock them down a peg. This is the mentality. I mean, if you ever talk to racist people with this mindset, it's funny because she's considered left somehow by some people, I guess.
Yeah.
But she's just as bad as any racist right winger that you will ever find and talk to on the issue.
Oh, totally. I've seen people in the chat. Let's get these likes up, everyone. Let's get everyone viewing what Brian is saying, because he is definitely dropping knowledge. So get those likes up, everyone. We're still about more than 100 away from how many viewers we got. So whoever's watching this, just go to the channel, go to the video, drop a like. But I mean, what you're saying is so true. And when Nancy Pelosi was asked about this at a recent presser, her response was, "Oh yeah, I think the Pentagon is worried that our plane might get shot down." It's like, okay, well maybe, but she said it in this manner of, I dare them to. And then you had Ro Khanna go on CNN and literally say, who are they? Who are they? Right? And this gets to the racism part of this. Who are they, the Chinese Communist Party, to tell Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, where she can travel, to set her travel schedule, to make it reduce what is an incredibly, I mean, I don't even want to say sensitive. I feel like that doesn't give it justice. An incredibly momentous, important flashpoint of this broader new Cold War, this broader military encirclement of China, this broader war effort on the part of the United States, building up toward the unthinkable with China, and responding to what would be kind of like lighting the fuse to the dynamite, what Pelosi's thinking of doing. I mean, it's incredible, but it gets to this point that you've been making. It's just like, China is viewed as not deserving of any respect, no matter how beneficial relations have been for the United States, no matter how many times the U.S. and China have come to the table to try to normalize relations and actually, make a lot of progress on that end over the last half century. Doesn't matter. The United States has this, especially over the last decade, has this kind of full speed ahead approach with China, where it wants to contain, which is a nice word, I guess, for undermine and overthrow the government. I mean, that it wants to weaken China's government. It wants to destroy its system, and it feels like any kind of provocation around Taiwan that Pelosi is thinking about could only lead to a much broader and a much deeper conflict. So I don't know. Anyway, back to you.
Well, what you were saying, I mean, containing China, it's a great way of saying control and dominate. And just think about what they're saying. I mean, this is official foreign policy of the U.S., the Biden administration. They said, China's not going to surpass the U.S. on my watch. I mean, he said that. Think about what that means. China has a population 4 or 5 times bigger than the U.S. They have the same amount of people as the U.S. plus over a billion extra. They have first-class infrastructure. If you've ever been to China and you see it with your own eyes, the U.S. cannot even come close to comparing. It's industrial base, unparalleled. They have access to natural resources, and they do this through trade, not by occupying countries and pilfering it like the U.S. is doing in Syria right now, for example. They also graduate millions of STEM graduates, millions more than the U.S. And STEM, if you don't know, is science, technology, engineering, math. These are all the fields that contribute directly to the economy, high-tech industry, things that give you economic but also military power. Why shouldn't China surpass the United States? If all people are equal, this is the mantra we hear from the U.S. If all people are equal, There's more people in China. They're working hard. They're well educated. Why can't they surpass the United States? And the reason why is because, and this is the truth, and a lot of people get angry with me saying this, is because they're not white. They're not white people. And so inherently white people in their minds have this position over everyone else. And it will be unthinkable, unacceptable for a non-white nation to surpass the West. That's what it essentially boils down to. And this comes from generations of imperialism. This has been going on. I mean, back in the day, the British Empire, they never even tried to hide it, that they thought of themselves as superior. Everyone else were barbarians, and they had to whip them into shape. And they're sitting on all of these resources, how undeserving they are of their own resources, and how it's the British role to go in there and relieve them of those and do something constructive that they weren't doing themselves. And I still hear people in the West make these arguments, like justifying the invasion of Middle Eastern countries. They're just sitting on the oil. They're not doing anything with it. We're going to do something more important with it. So it's our right. Might makes right. But might makes right isn't fun anymore when you're not the mightiest country. And this is the meltdown we see happening across the West on the left and the right. We see this meltdown because they're not the mightiest anymore. That they're seeing their power reaching its limit, and they see others pushing back. And it's not just Russia and China; it's many nations asserting themselves